Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the follow-up webinar for the Better Hay and Silage workshops. Hopefully you're getting a bit of rain where you are, so to keep that grass growing. My name is Jason Yassioli. I met most of you, I think. I'm the Western Beef Association Executive Officer. I would like to start this webinar by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, all the lands in which we meet today, from all different parts of the state, and pay my respects to past and present elders. May we all continue looking after this beautiful land in a sustainable way. I just would like to let you guys know that this webinar is being recorded, and we will be circulating the link later on. This whole project has been made possible by a grant that Western Beef has received from the federal government under the Future Drought Fund. I would like to also thank all our collaborators, different organizations, and a special thank you for DPIRD that is hosting this webinar today, and the Southwest NIM that is assisting us with the webinar today. You will have Peter Clifton doing the MC for the rest of the webinar. So the video is going to be recorded, as I mentioned, and will be made available on our website. As mentioned on the workshop, we will be emailing all the participants a voucher for feed test. You have to sort of cover the cost of mailing it, but the cost of the analysis will be covered by the project. We will sort of try to put up a deadline for the submission because we would like to compile all the results and have a second webinar early next year to go through the averages, but also have discussions on allocation. So the second webinar will be early next year. We'll probably be looking at February. We will also be running some ruminate beef workshops in coming months. I'll keep you posted when those workshops will be happening. And I think that's about this for me. I'll get Peter Clifton to take over and continue with the presentations.
All right, hello and welcome all. My name is Peter Clifton. I'm Program Manager at Sustainable and of Sustainable Agriculture at Southwest NRM. Just a couple of rules before we get going. If you can all stay on mute while others are speaking, and the mute button is down the left-hand corner of your screen. And secondly, feel free to put any questions in the chat down at the bottom. I'm just going to admit a few who are waiting. Yeah, feel free to put down the bottom of the screen. You'll see the chat. If you put your cursor down the bottom, the toolbar should come up and you'll see chat. You can put any questions in there, or you can just wait until our speakers have finished talking, and then we'll get you to raise hands, which is also down the bottom. Again, if you put your cursor down the bottom, you'll see a big raise hand, and you can just put your click on that, and I'll see you've got your hand up, and then we can refer to you for your question when the time comes. So our first speaker today is Dario Nandapi. So Dario has been working in the Southwest for about the last 30 years on hay and silage, helping farmers produce a quality product, and lots of it, hopefully. And so I'll hand over to you, Dario, to start with our first presentation.
I'll just be going through a summary that you'll be getting. Yazani will send to you. It's from Top Fodder, basically the 10 key steps to successful silage, and I've added a little bit of stuff in there on hay, but you'll all be getting a copy of that. So I'm just going to go through a summary of what we spoke about. So nothing new, but just to summarise what we're doing. So the first slide there, if you can see it up there, planning. first stage of these key steps are to plan first. So what are your goals? Now, will hay and silage be able to meet your feed requirements for different classes of stock? And is hay or silage going to be the most economic way to fill that feed gap? Balance rations and utilise excess pasture. And Dan went through the economics of different feeds per megajoule. And just remember that part of it, that you want to compare feeds on a cents per megajoule basis, and hay and silage might fill that, it might not. There might be other feeds available. The next one is, like we talked about, always target high quality silage and hay, and that'll help us maximise our animal production. It reduces production, storage, feed out costs per unit of stored ME, and it'll increase your management flexibility if we can make a high quality product. We've got a bit more flexibility there if we can do that. So next part of planning is to minimise costs. We should all be trying to minimise costs. Are your harvesting, storage, feed out systems well matched to maximise efficiency and minimise costs? Should you invest in capital in silage hay equipment or use a contractor? And Dan went through that exercise with you on the days, but just always plan ahead to think whether you could do it by yourself or if you're still better off getting a contractor. And will capital investment increase the efficiency and therefore increase profitability to buy that capital? Always think of that when you're going to buy a new tractor or whatever machinery you're going to buy, whether it's going to increase your efficiency or increase your profitability. And then we get on to after the planning stage, we get on to the making stage of our silage or hay. So basically we want to grow crops and pastures that will produce high quality forage and yield potential. So make sure we've got the great mother crop first. To make a good silage or hay crop, we need a good mother crop. So try to grow the best crop we can for that, whatever crop you're growing. And then the really important part is to cut it at the recommended growth stage. Nothing has a bigger influence on your silage and hay quality than the stage at which you cut it. And remember that the forage quality declines as the crop matures. So the main reason silage is better than hay is generally we tend to cut silage a lot early in hay, and that's why it's one of the main reasons it's better. It's not the only reason, but probably the main reason. And then if you're making especially silage, consider the effect of that regrowth in pasture, especially if you cut it early, you cut it, the better chance you've got a regrowth. And if you cut silage in that dry spell in September, now you've got all this rain on it, you're probably going to get some really good regrowth, really good quality regrowth coming back off that. So hopefully that's happened for some of you who've made silage already. Then making again, wilt it as quickly as possible to that target dry matter. Still banging on about dry matter, it's very important. So we want to dry those crops as quickly as we can. And the way we do that, remember, leave those swaths as wide as we possibly can. The more sunlight that falls on that swath, the better it'll dry. If you possible, use a mower conditioner because that'll help that plant dry quicker. And if you've got a tedder rake, use that and use it straight after cutting, because remember those stomata that stay open for those 2 hours is where we lose most of that water. And avoid rain at all costs. A little bit of rain, 1 or 2 mils, probably not too bad. And like some of you have said, every year you make hay, it gets rained on. Maybe consider making silage if that's the case, because rain is really going to increase our field losses, especially in hay making. And then making it again, minimise those losses during harvest and storage. Those target dry matters, 30 to 40% dry matter for pit silage, 40 to 50% dry matter for round bale silage, and around the 85% dry matter for hay. Hopefully that's all locked into your brains after I was going on about it forever and ever, but there it is again for you. If you're making pit silage, roll the pits thoroughly throughout harvest to eliminate air. Remember, air is the enemy. We don't want oxygen. The bugs that we want don't like oxygen, so we want to get rid of that air. And then seal those pits as soon as you possibly can after you've made those pits. If you're making round bale silage, high density bales to minimise those air pockets. Get the dry matter right and pack them densely to get rid of as much air as we can, and then wrap it as soon as possible and preferably at the storage site so we're not going to damage it once it's wrapped. And then for hay, high density bales, better the stack, they repel water better. Store it in a shed if possible. Remember the losses of storage of hay are quite small in a shed, but if they're outside, we're going to really increase our losses. Store it off the ground on pallets, on plastic, on corrugated iron tin, anything that keeps it off the soil interface, because we get a lot of wastage in that soil, the wicking effect from the soil. And if you're going to store it outside, remember in that north-south direction so the sunlight can hit all parts of it. And if possible, even cover it to keep the rain off it. Would help reduce the storage losses of our hay. So that's the making process of hay and silage. And then the next part of it is when we come to feed it out. There's a lot of wastage again when we feed it out. So ensure your feed out system will support high intake in your animals. ease of removing and eating forage affects intake. So the animals should be able to easily get that forage and eat it. You don't want to restrict them getting it out. They want to have good access to it. So the main thing for that is a feed out space per animal, and access time will affect that intake. So if you're going to go making troughs or whatever, or even hay rings, that you've got enough that all your animals have access to it, so we can maximise their intake of that forage. And remember also, the chopped forage reduces sorting and wastage. So another way of reducing that sorting is by chopping it if we can, either at making it for silage or in a mixer wagon if you've got access to one. And then again on feeding, again to minimise those losses during feed out, good feeding facilities will reduce the loss. We really want to control access to eliminate trampling and fouling. That's what animals do. They'll sleep on it, they'll trample on it, they'll defecate on it, and then we get wastage. So if we can limit that, we're going to reduce our wastage. Feed regularly and in quantities that will be consumed between those feeds. Basically, don't overfeed. If you overfeed, you've got more chance of wastage happening if we overfeed them. And then remember to keep those feed out areas clean to prevent contamination of fresh batches. If we've got mouldy feed sitting there and we put a fresh batch on top of it, the mould's going to increase its contamination of that fresh feed. So keep those feed out areas clean between feeds if you can to reduce contamination. And then after we've done all that, it's time to then evaluate what we've done. So keep records. It's hard if you haven't kept records. Were all operations done at the right time? What could be improved? Always have a look back and say, what could be done better? What did we do well? What could be done better? Use feed tests. You're going to get a voucher for those feed tests. So to monitor that forage quality, is it acceptable? Remember we like silage above 10 megajoules of energy per kilo of dry matter. And my battery's running low. And we want hay to be above 9 megajoules per kilo of dry matter. Use feed tests to monitor your animal production. Are animals producing as expected? And this is where, for those of you with cattle at least, the ruminate program can help you evaluate how the cows or sheep go in cows for ruminate. And remember to condition score your animals. That can tell us if they're gaining weight or losing weight or whatever. So that's how we can evaluate that the feeds we're giving them are doing as expected. I've got power back. That's great. And another simple test. Remember I went on about smells. Are there any abnormal smells in the silage and hay that may affect intake? Remember, the tobacco smell is an indication of heating, although it doesn't affect intake that much. The famous baby vomit smell from the butyric acid when the silage is too wet. Animals won't like eating that. The vinegar smell, if we've had too much acetic acid from a poor fermentation, it'll smell like vinegar. If it smells like a wine alcohol, that means you've probably had a yeast fermentation, which again indicates a poor fermentation. And if we get that musty, mouldy smell, that could mean our silage was too dry or our hay was too wet, and we'll get that mouldy sort of smell that we don't want either. And remember, good silage smells like Christmas cake, apparently. And then the last bit of evaluation, my last bit here, is to monitor your storage losses. Did that silage heat up at feed out? Remember, a great sign if we've got aerobic spoilage at feed out is the silage will actually heat when we open it up back to air. If you're getting heating, that means you've got aerobic spoilage. That means we've got to do something about that. Eliminate those feed out losses. Can you reduce your feed out losses when you feed it out to your animals? Is there ways you might be able to reduce those losses? And monitor your costs. And Dan will go on a bit more about this, but monitor your forage costs. Are there opportunities for you to reduce your costs in making that forage? That's the evaluation part. So that's the 10 sort of key steps very quickly. And like I said, you'll get that. Gisani will send you a copy of that to go through it in more detail. So are there any questions?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dario. Look, we'll just take one or two quick questions. And if you just want to unmute yourself, then I'll see who's unmuted and wants to ask a question, and I'll call out your name. But transfer
I'll do that.
The deal over while we're waiting. We'll just have a quick look. And if we don't get anything, we'll just move straight on with our second talk, and then there'll be a lot more time for questions after the second talk.
Okay.
I don't think anybody is going to ask a question just at the moment. So
slideshow. Yep.
No.
Pushing that out there.
So we'll hand over for our second talk. So we've got Dan Parnell from Agshaw Consulting to also talk. And Dan's been around the high rainfall zone for about the last 20 years, speaking to farmers, particularly in the dairy industry, as Dario does as well, about their hay and silage and yeah, managing their business. So over to you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'm going to step through a little bit of what we did during the hay and silage workshops, but I'm going to try and give it a in-season context, given what we've had happen to us from a very wet August into a dry spell and then a bit more rain now. And it sort of hurries along the decision-making process out there. And when do we cut and what do we cut and do we, we've got to make some decisions out in the real world. So that's the context I will try and stick to, and things to consider. One of the answers, that's just probably give people a process of how to work out the answers to make a better decision more often than not. So just a bit of the overview from what, and a lot of this overlaps with what Dario is saying about the cheapest feed is pasture grazing in the paddock. And I've had a few calls about the pastures out there at the moment in that sort of dry, warm spell that we had, and whether people should cut it and conserve it or just simply graze it off. And that's a good thing to think about, because if there isn't a significant surplus, then the best option may be simply graze it and seek feed elsewhere. We're going to add cost and lower quality if we mow it and make silage. So for some paddocks, that may play out, and that a paddock that we may have planned to cut for hay or silage may not get cut at all and be simply grazed off. So that's certainly an option that's still on the table, and something I've discussed with a few farmers in recent weeks. This rain might change that view, but we'll see how things develop. It's conserved fodder is only valuable if it fits a feed gap at a lower cost than alternatives, or has other benefits in, say, agronomy benefits like weed control and things like that. So we are in a fairly unique environment at the moment in that forage is particularly expensive to buy. So $4.50 a tonne for oat and hay and things like that. So, the fibre component is unusually high. So that brings things like grain and pellets into the mix as an alternative. Quite unusual, but it certainly makes that conversation different. So looking at some of those other options in the big picture are really important. We won't go into too much detail about this, but the various forage systems, hay or silage, do we cut hay or do we cut silage? Substantial differences there. It's really a fit for what that product can do for you. And I often say that it's very hard to compare the two. They are different products with different quality profiles, targeting for either different animals or feeding at different times of year. So hopefully some of those decisions about committing to hay or silage have already been made for the product that you get in terms of quality at the end of the day. Because you sort of got to have a bit of a lead time to commit. And probably the point that we always make is that there can be large differences with similar operations. So whether hay is your go-to or silage, doing it well can make a big difference to the bottom line, or the potential benefit you can get from your hay or silage. So just making every step a winner can make a big difference to the business. And Dario touched on, it's important to calculate some costs certainly on $1 per tonne dry matter basis at least, or preferably cents per megajoule, and having a line in the sand in terms of the alternatives that you've got out there that you can choose from. So that's really important to sort of probably change the language away from rolls to things like dollars per tonne or cents per megajoule, preferably. All right, so just marching along. Thanks. So do we cut silage and hay at all? And this is one that's from the workshops, is that we could potentially lose 80% of that surplus pasture that we grow if the weather is against us. But like I mentioned at those days, if we've got some paddocks during that lean dry spell, particularly light sandy soils that have turned their toes up, or we've got a short season variety in there that we're not going to get much, 80% of not much is not much. So we've probably got to ask our question, and I'll put some charts up later about quantity, and is there enough there to justify cutting? So that's probably a decision to make, and all your ability to use that spring surplus before you lose the quality. So that's a decision we need to make and say, is there a true surplus at the moment? For most of us, there still is. And and we still be doing some hay and silage. It's probably just that marginal paddock that we need to make a decision about. Okay. And like the 10 steps, or each of these steps is really important. So efficient overhead. So I assume most of us have already made a commitment with the gear that we've got on farm, or committed to a contractor, or a mixture of both. So that's something for a long-term decision. Hopefully people made that already, and committed somewhere, and we've got capacity or got a contractor lined up. Optimize for quality. We sort of ran that point home. Probably depends what options you've got. For a purely grass-fed system where you feed, you don't have grain in the mix, then that certainly still plays out. But like I said before, if you've got the option to feed some grain, or a system to feed grain, probably is a fairly unique time in that forage or fibre is more expensive than, we'll see how that market turns out. But, with high hay prices, it's not such a clear decision this year. But just bear in mind, that's just a once-off, perhaps, or very unusual set of circumstances. Obviously, maximise yield at the optimum time for quality. So again, we can dilute our fixed costs by doing that. Store well, again, hope that's a long-term decision around, sheds for hay, or where you're going to store your silage, or pit, how you develop your pit and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully there's some, that's in train there, and then some, working towards storing it well and reducing waste, and feeding efficiency. And Dario touched on that. So, that again is probably a capital long-term decision, rather than a seasonal one. But it should be always in our thinking as trying to, when feed's at a premium, those little 10%, 5% here, it does make those things add up. So just little changes to that whole success chain there can make a big difference. And I think Dario touched on measuring as much as we can, making some decisions early, particularly around feeding and how much you got, and using other feed resources that we've got at our disposal to make a really good decision. I think that that's a key learning from last year with a pretty lean spring, was making decisions early and working out how much fodder we had, making decision to go and buy extra early, and or reducing demand by, perhaps taking animals out of the business, making those decisions early, and not doing Hail Marys like, we'll assume it's going to be early break. That really is a Hail Mary. We've got to be prepared for that late break and have forage on hand for that. So I think making those decisions early, really important. Always really important. But I think the key learning from last year was that we've got two choices. We can increase the feed available, which is buying more, and make that decision early, or reduce the feed required. That's by reducing our herd or flock. So, making those decisions early can really help things along making decision. So hopefully this is a slide from that, and hopefully you've already made a decision, but it's all linked to, I thought, because of the phone calls I've been getting around yield and is the paddock worth cutting at all, I thought I'd just put these up again. So this is around scale and how much tons of dry matter you need to justify owning your own gear. And we're sort of sitting between that 300 to 400 tonne of dry matter, which is around 1,000 rolls of silage before owning your own gear becomes worthwhile. And that's based on round bale silage with a full contract versus owning all your own gear. I know there's different mixtures in between that, but it probably just shows that when the yield equation comes into it, this is still a factor around scale. But I've also built on this slide, which, without getting too technical, but it just shows the effect of yield. And when I did this, I was quite surprised. I thought, that you've got to have a pretty high yielding crop, but it's got to be a reasonable crop. It doesn't have to be. So that sort of tipping point there, you can see I've got owner operator round bale silage, full contract, and I've also threw in some cereals there, which is pit silage down on the green chart. It just shows the yields where you've to get your energy at a low cost. And just as a benchmark, pellets are around the 5 cents, 5.3 cents per megajoule. So that's sort of that on that first bar across the page there is 5. So that tipping point where the hay and silage does become competitive with those alternative is in around that 3 tonne to the hectare mark. So that's not a huge crop, but it's still, you know, it's there. So, yeah, that gives you the feel that for how much, you know, when it's going to be worth putting the mower in and where it's not. Likewise, you can see with the yield by having a contract of that blue line, you have less risk with poor crops because you don't own all those overheads. So probably sort of gave me a little bit more confidence doing this and that sort of analysis that, yeah, look, if you've got surplus and it's genuine, okay, it's not the big thumping crop that we've had generally, but if you can get, you know, certainly in that 4 tonne of dry matter, you're in a pretty good spot, you know, for round bar silage on that analysis. So I think it's just useful to get our eye in with that. But that, you know, that will vary, you know, do your own numbers. That's just with 100 hectares. So we've got reasonably on scale there. If you've got less area, it's going to be on the left-hand side of that chart. So just bear that in mind. So, so just moving on, I think probably Dario touched on this. I think a really important thing once we've gone out there, we've made some decisions and we've mowed it and we've baled it and made the product that we want and done our best to get a good high quality material in there and a good crop. We've got to make some decisions around feeding, and I'm doing the analysis as soon as you can, like Dario mentioned, testing the hay and silage as soon as possible, finding out what the quality is, finding how much you got, crunching those numbers early, and doing a feed budget. Really important. So looking forward, and don't assume the 15th of April break, like we want. That'd be fantastic. But, you know, we've got to be reasonable about that and no Hail Marys. And so, yeah, there's tools available, and Jasani's, there's some follow-up stuff around ruminate, and this is just an example that Phil Barry-Leonard put together. You know, these are tools that you can use, and you know, this one just showed that, you know, if we just relied on hay alone, which is diet number 1, yeah, we're actually losing money on trying to grow animals at half a kilo a day, whereas adding a little bit more grain like diet 3 there, we can make our silage, for example, in this example, stretch further by incorporating that little bit of grain. So it's one of those things that to do your budget, see how that looks, and see how far that forage is going to get you, and making decisions early. I think that's probably where we're at over the next few weeks. Is get cracking, make some good hay and silage, and then make some decisions early about feeding. I think that's really important. And so, main messages, work out the type of feeds you require and how much you win. I think that's point number 1 on Dario's top 10 points to success. Get savvy with chapter 11 in the hay and silage manual and how to work out the value of feeds, or use the ruminate to work out rations and the cost of those to you. So really important things to do. Choose the right feed option and commit to it. And just get better at it. You know, if you do, there's obviously to go grain, there's a commitment to that way of feeding. If that's the choice you make, commit to it, get better at it, invest in it. If it's not, and you're just going to be on a hay buggy or a silage buggy, then just work that out and get better at it. The feeding, more efficiencies, whatever it might be. And act early if feed needs to be outsourced. Obviously, we saw the hay price just steadily go up. The closer and closer we got to the break season last year, with some pretty outrageous sort of prices for importing in hay. So if we can make that decision early and be prepared, we'll stand us in better stead for next year.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Dan. Thanks for that. Now, question time. If anybody's got a question, I might just do the easiest thing and just get you to unmute, and I'll see who's unmuted on the screen, and I'll just call out your name and you can ask a question. While you're trying to find the unmute button, I might just start with one for Dario. Dario, what's the biggest risk with what can go wrong with silage? That's probably the fear that, you know, something will go wrong and you'll actually end up with, you know, worse than your hay. What are the couple of key factors that people need to do?
Again, I'll bang on getting the dry matter right. If it's too wet, we're going to get really bad silage. Animals aren't going to want to eat. And if we get it too dry, we won't be able to compact it, and we'll get air in there. And with air, we'll get mold, and both of them can have animal health issues. So definitely silage. And the other one that we did mention was botulism, which we can't do it in. If you've got a dead animal in there, you've got a dead animal in there, but you can vaccinate for that. But definitely, yeah, it can be dangerous if it's not done right. But if you get the dry matter right, most of those risks will be reduced greatly.
Okay. We've got one here from Du Falls. You're unmuted, so go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. It's Belinda and Peter here. Hi. So we've got a problem in one of our paddocks we've locked up now, where there's just the only thing that seems to have really taken off the most is the cape weed and the erodium, and it's just it's just chockers with that at the moment. Just been the season. You don't normally see much at all in this paddock, so just been obviously the season for it. So the clover's still there and there's some ryegrass there, but it's probably only been locked up, I think, a couple of or 2 weeks now max. But because we're right on the south coast in Denmark, west of Denmark. So what do you suggest? So how's that go in silage? Should you cut it early to try and get it before it seeds? And what do you reckon with that sort of thing?
Oh, the weeds definitely have, like we mentioned, have the high buffering capacity. So you've just got to really make sure things are going well. Focus on your ryegrass and clover. You don't want that to go too much to seed because you're after a quality product. And just make sure you've got you dry it quickly. You cut it in the afternoon so the sugar level's as high as you can get. And yeah, look, if things aren't going exactly right, we didn't mention it, but possibly using inoculants to try to make sure we steer that towards a lactic acid sort of fermentation. And then long term, see if we can do things to get rid of those weeds, because the high buffering capacity does make it harder to make good quality silage. The pH.
Yeah, so right, is that sort of when to cut? So do you sort of, because of the clover and the ryegrass, I guess they're never going to outcompete it, but they're getting better. They sort of are picking up. But I guess there's sort of, and we've never had a drama in that paddock before. And some years the paddocks over that property just have lots of thistles, and some years have lots of dock, and some years have lots of cape weed. It's just how it sort of seems to work out. And then you don't see them for years, maybe decades. It just sort of how it works there, without even controlling them. So yeah, so there's sort of that fine line, isn't there? So you reckon just let it get as far as it can. So I mean, obviously the cape weed's flowering now. The erodium's not quite. So yeah, so you'd reckon just sort of let it get to I guess a certain point before those things go to seed, I guess, is the trick, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And because you're in Denmark, it's probably hard to make hay. Like it's not going to be brilliant silage, but you're probably going to make it worse if it gets hay and get rained on. So you probably have to make silage out of it. And so the earlier you cut, generally the better. And like Dan had on that slide about the yield, the cost of the better the yield, the sort of cheaper it becomes. But what do you say, 2 or 3 tons was sort of reasonable to sort of cut it. So
yeah, I'd go silage and just let it grow. Try and get some bulk in there before the ryegrass goes reproductive as much as you can. I mean, the cape weed and all that is fine. It'll ensile. But it's not ideal. And you're going to have probably, once it's finished flowering, the sugars in that cape weed are not going to be great. So you're going to, use an inoculant maybe. One thing you might want to do is chop it if you can, if you've got a chopper to try, because try and make every post a winner, given what's going in the mower isn't perfect. I would try and just, from here on in, okay, we haven't got cape weed out, but let's try and make every post a winner with the decisions we make from here on.
Condition it better if you can. Dry it as quickly as you can.
Try and get
it well, at the moment with the tractors are getting bogged in that paddock, so so we can't even take a ute across it in most of it. So, that's where we're at.
Yeah, I think you got time. So provided there's a reasonably long season variety of ryegrass in there, I'd sort of let a bit of sun on it, let it grow, and try and get more of that good stuff in there,
Well, and sometimes the cape weed will sort of burn itself out a bit anyway. It seemed to be just sort of flowering now, so that may even die down before the other stuff really needs. Yeah, that might be a bonus too. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. Move on to our next question from David.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, so we've just done our silage. We probably cut it a little bit too early as far as yield goes, but we had one block is a bit sandier than the other, and we just had contractors, so we kind of got stuck, and the sandy block was drying off, but the question being, on the other block it had a bit of cape weed in that particular paddock, and because we had a contractor wrapping it in a tube, we were sort of stuck for time. And with the hectares that we were cutting, we probably didn't quite get that one particular paddock dried down enough. I'd say it's probably sat closer to around 35-40% dry matter. What are going to be our biggest? It seems to be holding up okay in the in the roll, but I'm tipping it's probably a little bit wet. Is our biggest issues? Yeah, what are our biggest issues with that wetter silage? Is it just sort of that that poor fermentation and just the animals not wanting to eat it, the palatability of it, or yeah.
Yeah, that'd be the main one. And look, 35 is not that bad for round bale, especially if they're holding together. So you might find it might still be reasonable silage. In fact, you cut it early, probably be good quality. Have you had any regrowth from those ones you cut early?
Yeah, so our paddocks are really thumping along now because we cut them about a week ago, and then we got 15 mil just the other day. So yeah, they're really thumping along, and I think we'll probably near get maybe another cut if
Excellent.
it's raining.
Yep. Yeah, good. Look, so 35, the real bottom end. But look, if rain's coming or whatever, that's what you have to do. That's what you have to do. So it shouldn't be too bad. But if anything, it'll be that butyric acid, sort of the poor fermentation. So you might get a bit of palatability issues, maybe. But
yeah, it's just
35's
more the
not too
fact
bad.
that like we probably could have held off on that particular block and got a bit more yield out of it to start. But our other block was drying
Ready.
off. I think things were going down, clover was wilting,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So
Sounds to me like you got the timing right, because you'll probably overall yield will be good now for the regrowth you're getting.
yeah. So, and I think the quality will be really good because there was barely any head emergent.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it'd be really good quality. We just sort of probably paying a little bit higher for that cents per meg, just the fact that the yield was lower.
And also, if you do bear in mind that my analysis is just one on a single cut. If you go to a double cut, all your overheads are sunk costs already, and it's only the operations that you need to cover. So, so just bear that in mind. So even though you've gone early and the yield's probably likely better, if you get good regrowth and you're able to use it, and then you either graze it or put it in another bale, that does help that equation in your favour a little bit. So just bear that in mind. So I think, like say, a really poor crop, we're not going to mow it. But if you've got the lower yield, but you still got potential to grow more after in a strong soil, like you say, that you're only going to cover your operations then.
Yeah, and I mean the paddock's coming back really clean as well, so we've wiped out a lot of those. But some of that cape weed sort of hung in there because we cut so early. But it's definitely looking a lot cleaner, and it's just a really good dry clover stand now. So yeah, no, we're pretty happy with it.
Very good.
Thanks, David. Any other questions? Just feel free to unmute if you can't find the raise hand. Oh yeah, Jason. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just wondering on silage. We've never done it before, but I was just wondering we've got a few paddocks of perennial veld grass that we've sown for cattle feed. And the cows love it when it's in the paddock, but we sometimes end up with a bit of a surplus. Just wondering what that would be like to make into silage. We've done hay out of it before, and it worked not too bad, but it took a long time to get dry. And I was thinking one day maybe silage would be a better option. Wondering what you guys heard of that happening.
Yeah, it won't be on you won't have to dry it as much, which will probably help it. And then just depends on what the buffering capacity is and the sugar content of it is. I don't know what they are, but as long as the sugars are good and it's not a high buffering crop, it should make a good silage crop as well.
Okay. Yeah, I would have. Without testing it, I would have thought the sugars should be pretty good because it seems to be wheatish sort of grass.
That's right. So the grass is generally good and good low buffering too. So not as high buffering. So it should make a good silage crop. And if you had trouble drying it for hay, at least with silage you won't have to dry it for as long. Same rules though. Try it as quickly as you can. Probably condition it, header if you got one. But have a go at that. And has it gone ahead yet, or what stage?
It has it now. We've probably missed it for this year, I feel. but it's just something that, if we were better organised, because we don't have any silage pits or anything either, so we need to get more organised.
okay.
But it's just something that if we know it's an option when we have a surplus again one year, well, maybe we try it kind of
Yeah,
thing.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, if it's pit, well, it's probably going to be chopped anyway.
Yeah.
But getting things chopped, something that we don't know the palatability of that. I've heard some feedback. People made silage out of millet and things like that, and the cows don't like it, and it's never been chopped. So I just wondered sometimes too, just for palatability, chopping it. It's always good. It makes better silage, and it might make it more presentable to an animal too.
Yeah.
So
All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Are there any others? I was just going to ask as well, just maybe Dario, again back to you, just about the tethering. Was that like within 2 hours, is it?
If you can, because the plant's tomato are open, that's when they lose, I think, 100 litres per tonne compared to 20 when they're closed, and they close in that first half an hour to 2 hours. So if you've got to tetherate, the most important time to do it is straight after, and you get less leaf damage and stuff as well because the plant's still moist. So if you can tether it.
I would even say to immediately.
Yeah, straight behind.
Behind, yeah. No, don't. 2 hours is
the end of it. Yeah, 2 hours at the end of it. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, sooner. Yeah. Can.
All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. I don't know if you've got a question for each other.
How much? When's it going to rain next week?
Yeah, what's October rain going to be like?
When's it going to rain? Yeah. Okay. Well, it is, but
good start so far.
how long's it going to last? All right. Well, are we happy to? We didn't do the poll. I know we were going to run a poll, so maybe we'll just do that for now. I'd sort of given up on it, seeing as I missed my chance, but we'll quickly try and run that if I can find it again. So just so we know a little bit more about you, for the funding body, is it? Okay, good. So I'll just launch it. You'll see it come up on your screen. There'll be 3 questions, and if you just answer those questions, they're pretty simple questions. It should just be coming to you now. So the first one is just whereabouts do you farm? And then there's one about the number of sheep and cattle, or number of stock, and also one for number of hectares if you just scroll down. We'll leave that with you for a moment. Well, it's my opportunity for this.
Can I ask a quick question while everyone's doing their thing there? Just Belinda again.
Yeah, sure.
So we just we've only, because we're definitely a lot wetter than everyone else, a bit later our season over here. We've only just bunged our spring, so our hay burst super out yesterday. We weren't actually going to put any out because it was so wet, and we did have a couple of big rains here. And then we decided, actually, with this big rain coming today, we'd race in and grab a couple of bulker bags and bang it out yesterday. So we did do that. So. And obviously, we're sort of expecting now to lock up for the next 5 or 6 weeks, I suppose. What sort of, and this is sort of not really a silage question, it's more of an agronomy question, I suppose. But what sort of effect? How long? We've always imagined that it would be sort of 6 weeks. Efficiency of that effectiveness of that super that we've just chucked out, and it was just like a hay burst mix, spring burst type thing. And would it give you some extra kick when you get the regrowth as well, if there still is rain around in November when we cut it?
Yeah, absolutely. So good decision. I think that's going to add yield and quality to what you've got. And I would say, give it 4 weeks to get the benefit of that, full benefit of that at least. So you could, if it's still vegetative, then give it 6 and you'll still be high quality. And and by having better fertility, you'll have better post cut or grazing production there as well. And that's sometimes a common practice where with an early cut of silage we'll refertilize you know, and
Oh, reefer, yeah, right. Yep.
so we'll cut early and then put, it's usually just straight nitrogen. You know, if it's ryegrass dominant, then we'll just go straight nitrogen or something like that. But that's common. I actually looked at some plant tests this morning that it's had a dose of spring fert and it's looking good, but just the nitrate's quite low. So the recent nitrogen uptake's been a bit low. So we're going to cut it and then reapply, target some good regrowth and reapply. Yeah, we'll go out there with 50 of urea or 65 urea, just a little sniff, and give it an extra chance post silage cut, which we were looking to do in the next 10 days. So
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So it obviously depends on your rainfall and things, but so it should that work for about 6 weeks. You reckon? You should get us a good 6 weeks from it.
Yeah, that's what it's traditionally been. 4 to 6 weeks post application is a good place to sort of work. It will depends, you know, if sandy soils 4, better soil 6, you know, it's sort of, and depending on your leggy component a little bit, but there's a few little provisos there, but that's probably a good place to sit and start thinking about mowing in 4 and whether it ends up still going pretty good and you end up at 6, well, so be it. Yeah.
Yep, lovely. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Belinda. And I'll just end the poll and we can quickly have a look at the results. So we're generally, most people from the Great Southern, about 100 to 500 hectares with one bigger one there, and 100 to 500 cattle on the highest one there.
No sheep.
Yeah, sheep.
Yeah, there's sheep.
Yep, right.
Yep. One with less than 1,000 and one with 1,000. So yeah, a bit of a mix. All right. Close that down. Was there any last questions?
Yeah, I've got one there for Dan, if it's possible. I cut around hay in rolls, and because of the unpredictable weather, if it's dry in, say, 3 days and you're getting, say, 60-70% dry matter, if it's going to rain, would you wait until the dries out after the rain, or would you roll it prior to?
If that was for hay, 60 to 70 is danger zone for heating. So I would. You've got very little choice. You will just have to try and dry it as best you can, and that would mean tethering it or something like that.
Windrow it up. So
windrow it first before the rain, and then tether it.
Then break it out again. Yeah.
Bit of sun, and try and target your 85, 90 where you got to be. So unfortunately, with hay, that's the risk of having the rainfall. So I'm not sure if that's it, Dari. You want to add to that?
They say, like, if you're getting up, 5 or 10 mils, not going to do a huge amount of damage. So I'd say dry it before you bale it, because if you remember the field days, the losses you get from heating hay are just astronomical. So, as well as the risk of fire. So, but yeah, best is to windrow it so the rain only stops on top of it, then rake it up, rake it out again so it's got a chance to dry. And if it's not too much rain, it's not diabolical, but yeah, if 10 inches are coming and there's no breaking at all, then you might use hay guard or something and do it, but that's unlikely this time of year. I would have thought that the rain's not going to be that much. So I would bale it once you get it to the right dry matter.
Right, so you recommend raking it and then re-rake it later on when it dries out?
Yep.
And the downside of that, of course, is each time you handle it, there's going to be a bit of leaf shatter
and stuff,
and so you're going to lose a little quality and on top of any weather event and top of it being on the ground for so long. Yeah. So, a few little things fighting against you there, but that's definitely the way to go if you're confronted with that, for sure.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Alfred. And we've got a couple more questions come through, starting to warm up. Ty Neal. I hope I said that right.
Tennille, close enough.
Tennille.
I have a quick question. So I have taken some samples of a client's silage yesterday. I haven't gotten the results back yet. I haven't had anything to do with sort of the process of cutting it, et cetera, but I am assuming it's not going to be great. It was just sort of off a visual assessment. It was really loose, really wet, and super vinegary. It's been in there for like it's been ensiled for 2 weeks now. Is there like, obviously I'll get the results back and we'll go from there, but is it kind of done? Like, is there anything that we can do to try and salvage it, or can I suggest that they feed it out with straw, et cetera, to try and still be able to make use of it if it comes back not great?
Yeah, just if it's a pellability, there's not much you can do for it now, but if there's a pellability issue, then just dilute it. It's probably the best thing you can do, is dilute that down. At least if it smells like vinegar, it'll be stable when they open it. It won't deteriorate that well because the vinegar actually, the acetate actually prohibits mold growth and yeast growth, which is good. That's why they use it in some inoculants. But yeah, not much you can do once it's done. And all I can think of is diluting it down.
Yeah, awesome.
And then trying not to make them selective with what you dilute it down with. You know, you're sort of looking at a mixing wagon or something to mix it through to get good intake. Otherwise, I'll flick it around and was it chopped, or was it just chopped? So
I just think
so less chance of that happening. So, but anyway, that would be a challenge.
Yeah. So there you go. Animals sometimes surprise us.
Yeah, you never know.
They surprise us sometimes.
And the tests might come back and surprise us all.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll see.
Thanks, Danielle. And I think Belinda, you've got another one.
Sorry, one last question again. I thought I'd put the camera on so you can see we're real. Hey, just on Alfred's question, I was just thinking, so because we do get big rains here sometimes, the middle of November when we're cutting, or late November, what if it gets to say 3 or 4 days of the track and you're going, oh, the hay's nearly, it's doing really well. It's probably at, I don't know, 60, well, no, it wouldn't be 60%. Yeah, maybe 60%, let's say, where he got to. And then you've got a big shower coming, got an inch of rain coming. Would you bale it and make this haylagey sort of thing, which is what we've sort of done in the past? And what's the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, that's an option. The problem, it's just a little bit too dry, so it's very hard to compact. So you want to make sure, if you could chop it, would be better, and make sure your balers can squeeze it as tight as it can to get the air out. So you've probably got a chance of getting some mold growth in it, but that could be the lesser of two evils. So yeah, that could be an option. And maybe if it's that dry, in the morning when there's still a bit of dew on it, it might lift that moisture content just that little bit, just to make it a bit better. And then definitely use inoculants on it as well if it's not ideal. Yeah, it'd be a good time to use some of those inoculants as well.
Right. Thank you.
So I'd sort of try and treat it as like very dry silage. That's what it is, and
it'll be hard to compact.
So that's what you've got.
Yeah, which is what we tend to make that a bit here. We do leave it down for 3 or 4 days, and it's sort of this in-betweeny stuff that we've always called haylage, and we're going to sort of still make some this year and get it tested. Sorry, the dog. Get it tested and just see how it's looking as far as all the feed tests go.
Is that sort of like, remember, the longer it's sitting on the ground, the more field losses you've got. So maybe if you're going to, instead of doing the haylage, try to get it at 40 to 50% dry matter and just make round bale silage out of it. You'll get a much better fermentation, better compaction, less air, so you'll make a better job of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was, and sometimes because it's so thick, our feed is so thick, it's sometimes it's hard to get that evenness of the drying and that sort of stuff. So but no, we're looking forward to using the microwave test this year and giving that a go and seeing what the dry matter actually is, because we just always guess. We're excited.
No, that's good.
And then when you do get your sample and get it tested, look for that pH.
Yeah,
that'll guide you how
good it was,
how good the fermentation
and the ammonia level. Yeah.
So that'll give you a good clue, whatever you make, how all that's gone.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool. Thank you.
I think, I'm not sure, David, did you have another question? Hand went up for a moment there and then disappeared.
Yeah, it was just on what you said earlier, Dan, you made mention of some people making millet silage.
Yeah.
We grew some millet last year. It was the hybrid. It was the Perla.
Yep.
So it's got quite a higher protein level. What's the issue with millet silage? Is that generally towards the Jap millet, or is it just the way they ensiled it, or?
Don't know. I mean, there's just some feedback I had last week about ensilating millet. The cows wouldn't eat it. So for whatever reason, the palatability was not there. You'd think, in theory, it should be fine, but I don't know. But one thing we did discuss was chopping it just to try and
Make it
make it
better,
easier.
yeah.
At least make it easy to eat. You know.
They've tended to be probably like quite a bit low in sugars.
Yeah. Look, anyway, that's just
Yeah.
one anecdote that I heard on the phone. So don't sort of, there could have been something else at play there. But in theory, I can't see why it shouldn't make reasonable silage.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think it'd be too much of an issue for us if we did go down that track anyway, because we invested in a mixer wagon last year anyway. So
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
we'll just mix it
And
through.
the other thing, I suppose, is when you're growing that millet, if there isn't a surplus, that it's cheaper to graze.
Yeah.
Like if you can directly graze it.
Yeah, we're just a little bit stuck. Like one of our blocks is like dry, and the other block is holds a lot more moisture. So
Yep.
we'll grow it on that block, but all our weaners and everything,
Oh, yep.
it'll be at home on the sandy block. So
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
Or just direct chop it.
Direct
feed it
chop,
straight out.
yeah, green chop it.
Yeah. Don't need to bale it and silage it. Just green chop it. Yeah.
Oh, so what do you mean there? Like
Just chop it and feed it direct. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Boil it for 12 hours, if that, and just feed it direct.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David. Jasani's just noted that evidently some insurance companies over East are reinforcing the dry matter parameters for your hay before approving insurance on sheds. So to make sure they don't end up with being burnt down and having to pay out. So yeah, just something might be worth thinking about.
Yeah, right.
There you go. All right, well, we're just about hitting 4 o'clock. So unless there's any final questions, we might call it a day there. Not 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, sorry.
Yeah, 5 o'clock, yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for your input. That was great. And yeah, some really good questions there. And so it's been a worthwhile hour. Thanks for all coming, and good luck with your season. Hopefully you get just the right amount of rain at the right time, which will never happen. But anyway, try and as close as you can. And yeah, we'll look forward to sort of seeing you next time. So thanks a lot for coming along.